reservation?
Oh, I just dropped out of society. I kind of live moment to moment. I really don't do reservation things anymore.
Trust me, you don't wanna touch me. You will lie and say you love me. I wanted to be a new life in your life. Trust me, you don't wanna love me. I tried my best to tread lightly. I never wanted to ruin your fantasy.
Welcome to the 2-month review, the weekly podcast from Open Letter Books and 3%, in which we take one book, break it down bit by bit, talk about it, analyze it, have fun. This season, we are doing Kjersti Skomsvold's Monsterhuman, which is a book that's translated from the Norwegian by Becky Crook. It was published by Delphi Archive Press a few years ago, and today we'll be covering pages 92 through 143. And if we're going to use your introduction, Brian, this is a chapter in which a person gets better, and then there's a part where that person goes back in time to remember how they got worse. It's a circle. It's a circle of disease.
Yes.
So how are you doing? Yeah. This
great.
is Chad from Open Letter, joined by, as always, by Brian Wood, author of Joytime Killbox.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I had a lot of fun with this one because it deals with all the neuroses of writing, and who doesn't love hearing about your own work that you do, right? Like,
this is one that's super funny because it is. I feel like these parts are ones that hit you the most. Like, you have a book coming out in like 2 months, and like this is all like that neurotic writer stuff, like all like right in your face.
Yeah, I'm terrified about it. I told my class about it the other day too, where there'll be moments where like, I don't really like this very much. This was a bad idea. And then maybe because it's too close. Then you give yourself a little bit of distance from the work, and then you see it again. You're like, hey, it's not so bad. This could be okay. Oh no, this was a bad idea. This is awful. And then I don't know. You just wake up at night sweating. Who cares?
So I have a follow-up to something we talked about last week. We were talking about the difference between author, writer. What was it? Was it just those two, or was there a third one?
Yeah. I was talking about a panel where I was the only one that said writer on it, and everybody else said author on it, and I immediately felt like I'm not good enough to be here.
Okay, so
because I'm just a writer. Everybody else here is an author.
So I'm proofing The Dreamed Part by Rodrigo Frazan right now because we have to have it. We have to have it to the printer by like Monday, so it has to be proofed by like Friday. And I started,
a few hundred pages.
I started on Sunday. I have to read 100 pages a day, which I've done twice so far. So today will be my third day. I'm making it. It's a process, but there's a whole section in there. And this sort of ties into the 2-month review because we will do that after we do Ducks Newburyport, so that everyone gets the second part of the Frazan trilogy. But there's a part where he talks, the author from the invented part talks about how even now that he's not a writer, he's an ex-writer, but he's always going to call himself a writer. And forever he'd only written down profession of writer. So he chose to use writer and never author.
Yes.
So there you go.
Good. I'm the same way.
Backs you up.
Good. Because it's kind of like I was watching comedians in cars getting coffee on Netflix. And there was this part where Jamie Foxx talks about where he calls it his fame face. Like, you get a little bit of money, you start getting fat. Right, like you're living well. Start wearing maybe a little bit too much leather. And then you got like bad at comedy. He started bombing because he was like talking jokes about, man, how about Range Rovers, huh? It's not very funny anymore. So then when he won an Oscar, he gave it to his manager. He's like, I don't want to touch this. I don't want this near me. Like, it'll mess me up. So yeah, I always thought about like, I want to be a writer because I always want to be writing, whereas an author is somebody who has written.
Right.
And it's like, no, I like the idea of always moving forward, writer. Yeah. And it's in here too, where she talks about she's really nervous to tell people she wants to be an author.
Yeah.
Because there's something, I don't know, it feels pretentious to be like, oh, what do you do? I'm an author. Well, what do you really do? I work at Starbucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I walk dogs.
Yeah, exactly. What do you actually do to make money?
Like something that's actually useful to the world, not just writing nonsense.
Yeah.
No, man.
That's funny. No, I totally identify with what Kjersti does in here and what Rodrigo's doing, and in his book for sure. It sounds like
It's wild to read that book again in such a condensed time frame. Cause like I read it over like a month when it came in as a manuscript, like 20, 30 pages a day. Cause it's long. To read it all, like knowing what the sort of scope is, to read it all like poof, in 1 week is a wild trip. Like it's mind bending.
it makes sense why I haven't got any weird baseball texts from you this week. So like, I get it. I get it now. It's because you're working. You're actually working.
I do have a baseball digression that I think can tie into this. Okay. So I'm going to tie this into Monsterhuman because one of the things that goes on in here, aside from like her going back and forth on like being excited to write and being nervous about writing and like,
this was an amazing section, by the way. I loved it.
I did too.
Really, really fun.
I really liked, so I know as we found out that you didn't read the second one before here, the second part that we're going to talk about, but the two of these put together, as you'll see, work really well. And it's kind of amazing. But she goes back and forth with like her nervousness. There's like a line on 93 where she's like, God damn, I can't wait to wake up tomorrow. That's when I'm going to read through the book again and try and consider both the plot and the comma rules at the same time. She's like excited about her writing, but she's also sort of like shown in Codex is like myth building around her sense of author and becoming an author, becoming a writer, and who that person would be. And she's in control of her own myth here of like what she's telling us. We're taking at face value as like this has been her life. So when you get to the second section of this part, the lock, it goes back in time to when she first goes to college and can't make it through. So it's like she's going to tell us what that experience is like in choosing those things. So you've heard me say this before, but I don't believe in Babe Ruth. I think that Babe Ruth was a person who was good at baseball. However, a lot of things that were said about him are just myths because people wanted a great American hero. And so they all sort of colluded, newspaper people, radio people, to create this idea of Babe Ruth as this like gigantic force because there was no way that you could check it. You were just dependent upon these people who are writing things for newspapers, who are like, I've been in the Hall of Fame. They have like, here's a 550-foot home run from Babe Ruth, and it's a drawing of the stands and a line of where the ball went. And it's like 550 feet. Like, what the fuck is that? There's nonsense.
This parabolic curve, drawn in with a black pen
by some journalist who's definitely doing whiskey and gin as he's like writing.
No, that's the same thing with Mickey Mantle's 600-foot home run that was in a lumber yard somewhere, and like whatever. We want these myths. So the Babe Ruth one, what's funny is I've got new information about this that is really interesting. And even if you don't like baseball, this is great about like media in our media times right now. So the big article that everyone knows about like Babe Ruth's history is this like serialized, like 12 or 14 part thing that was serialized in this newspaper. It's tens of thousands of words long about Babe Ruth's history. The writer who wrote that met with Babe Ruth for less than 15 minutes one time and then wrote the entire thing after that. But then Babe Ruth was interviewed on a radio station in Pittsburgh, and the interview was scripted. He was given his responses to say to the questions when he went into the studio to say it. Okay. So they gave him the script of how he's going to answer all the questions. And the radio person was like, hey, welcome to Studio Babe Ruth. And he froze and he just went mute. So the guy grabbed the script from him and did a different voice and just read the answers to Babe Ruth's interview in a different voice. And afterwards, people were like, babe, you're so great on the radio. You have like a really smooth delivery. But like all of it was bullshit. All of it is bullshit. So every white dude sounded exactly the same back then. Well, I'll say that's quite a dinger there. Well, like that's every single person I've ever heard that's been recorded back then. So like you can totally get away with that.
But it's like that part
Golly,
of that.
I'll say, boy, what a catch. Got a lot of cabbage for that hit. Like, why did white dudes talk like that then? I don't get it.
It's like the weirdest.
I don't know why the white dudes talk like we talk right now. I don't know.
I don't know why we do anything we do.
They'll make fun of us in a couple of years, I'm sure. But
for sure. But yeah, so that's my sort of tangentially relates to this in the sense that she is kind of creating her own sense of self out of it, which we did talk about. And it's like much more, it's clearly like she's not making things up the way that these other people were. But as a writer, it's easy to see how those myths could be made too.
Well, that's kind of like the appeal with autofiction in some ways, right? I remember there's always the famous Joan Didion quote, like, did it snow, when that happened? No, but it doesn't matter if it snowed, because if I felt like it, like if it's snowing outside, like makes the emotion better for what I'm trying to get out, and the reader gets it, that's what matters more so than the actual fact of did this happen or not.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think.
And then you got like
Yeah.
the Pynchon way of it, of like just being completely reclusive or J.D. Salinger, and then people create a myth around you.
Yeah, which is
another
funny
way.
that I brought up the Didion in the snow, because in here the writing, the workshop teacher is like, maybe a little more weather to make it more realistic. She's like the weather is real.
That's one of my favorite parts. Absolute favorite parts.
Who gives a shit about the realistic weather?
Yes, that's on wait, yeah, right here, 115. She's like, I read the first. It's Peter Sarek is our teacher. Peter Sarek is 50 years old and handsome and knows so many things, and there's no reason to believe that he doesn't also have a good sense of humor. I read the first chapter about Mathea, thinking that all of the 12 students are going to clap. They all clap. I take it as a sign that the universe knows what it's doing. My hands tremble and I'm crimson as a tomato long afterwards. Peter Sarek says that yes, it was pretty good. I want him to say that yes, it was absolutely fantastic. Peter Sarek points out that not everything is completely realistic. But what is realistic, actually? He also says that I should describe the weather, as if the weather could have any meaning at all. But the next time I can continue reading where I left off. But I don't want to do that. She's great.
There's something really wonderful about this pendulum of like this absolute like unshakable confidence of like they clap. So apparently the world knows what it's doing since people appreciate my work, because my work is amazing.
Yep.
And at the same time, like, I don't want to read my work anymore because I'm so embarrassed. And, like, there's this I love this back and forth of it.
It's really great. Like it feels more honest for that reason, that it's not always grandiose. It like undercuts itself or goes in sort of cyclical patterns. And I think that's part of what she gets at towards the end of this, is this sort of cyclical pattern of like feeling good, not feeling good, and with all of her life. So, I mean, in terms of plot, in this one, she like gets past her ex-boyfriend. Yeah.
Well, the neat thing with this, with like some of the comedic aspects of this, is I've been doing a lot of reading and watching stuff on comedy. And I saw recently Ricky Gervais was saying, like, the way he does his comedy is what's comedic is somebody that is completely, well, not completely, but is inept or incapable of doing something, and they set about to do it. Like, they don't have all the tools yet, or they're not prepared yet, and watching them kind of blunder their way through it is fabulous comedy. And I feel like there's something like that with what Kjersti's doing here, where it's like, I made a novel. It's 38 pages.
Yeah.
I changed it to double space because maybe 38 pages isn't long enough for her. Not like she, like, you know, she wants to write, but she doesn't, you know how to be a writer, or whatever that means.
Right.
An author. Right. And I think we're loving the fact that she's, determined to do it no matter what, and it's so like just fun and funny and encouraging and sad, and it has this wonderful like pendulum of emotions that we're swinging through. It's I think what makes it so great.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. I have a question for anyone who's listening who's Norwegian. So there's a bonus episode of the 3% podcast where I talked to Jan Erik Riley, who's he's the editor of Norwegian fiction for Cappell and Dam, who's mentioned in here. It's like one of the big publishers of Norwegian literature and of fiction. And when I was talking to him, he mentioned, I had found this interview where he compared all these Norwegian writers to American counterparts or world counterparts, like, like this person equals X plus Y plus Z. And it was pretty funny. They're very funny. And like, he's like, yeah, those are all pretty accurate still. But one of them was for Stig Saderbakken, and he mentioned Antony of Antony and the Johnsons, who's mentioned here in 96, where she's like in love with the Antony and Johnson CD. She gives it to Eric. She goes to see him in concert. What is it with Norwegian people obsessed with like, it's like I mean, he's famous and he's a singer, but it feels like it's like a very weird thing for this to come up multiple times in relation to like Norwegian authors who are big fans of like Antony.
I don't know what it is. I don't even know what that is.
He is a chamber pop musician who had a few albums come out, and they changed his name to something that's that he performs under now that I don't want to pronounce wrong.
Okay. Well, I mean, I just got Spotify 2 weeks ago, so I'm like way behind the curve on all this stuff. So like, I'll see if he's on there, and yeah.
He is, and it's Antony
Antony.
Haggerty is his real name, but he goes by Anohni now.
What kind of music is it? Just pop music?
It was like sort of more croony, the early ones, but the Oni, the new ones, are a little bit more. How would you say, like a little bit more electronic and a little bit more. I don't know. I hear it refers to it as art pop, which I guess that's a term.
Sure. Okay.
You know, whatever. It's a little bit more electronic and a little less chamber poppy. If any of those words make sense, but I'll use it. I'll use the beginning of whatever song it is that she loves on here.
I'm curious as a publisher, just to as you're talking about music and pop music and stuff. I've been very interested and been following this lawsuit that's happened between the Christian rap group. I think they're called Joyful Noise, or the song was called Joyful Noise, and they won a lawsuit for like $2.8 million for Katy Perry's song Dark Horse, because it was similar.
Oh, I kind of remember seeing something about this.
And the defense for Katy Perry's legal team was like, this song is so basic. Like there's nothing original in this song, so how could we have copied it? Like their defense is, wait, this song isn't good. We're not going to give you money. but they ended up losing. But I'm wondering, does that ever happen within literature? It happens all the time with music, where everybody's like, you've taken something, or like you're not allowed to be influenced, or to, I don't know, maybe it's like versus, outright stealing versus homage versus I don't know what, but like you see it in literature all the time.
I know. Yeah. There's always those lawsuits of plagiarism.
Like Burroughs is mentioned in here. So I was thinking of like the cut technique with Burroughs, or like Acker would use the cut, and that's okay. We're okay with that. Or, I know there's some legal ramification where you have to cite it in your work, but that doesn't seem to happen the same way it does in music, does?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, there are every once in a while you hear about those like plagiarism lawsuits, and I don't think I've ever heard one that like was awarded to the plaintiff. Like there's like the J.K. Rowling got sued by that person who's like, I wrote this exact same thing as Harry Potter. She was traveling to the U.S. when this book came out. It's clearly like an analog, and like that lawsuit got thrown out. I think it's very hard to prove plagiarism for books because there's too many elements, right? Like there's too many things that are in the air, that are easy. But with music, maybe because you can be like, this arrangement of notes is exactly the same. Like this component or this sound is so specifically the same that there's no way that you can just happen upon it. Whereas like with books, you could be like, oh, you had a character that's like a young boy who becomes a powerful wizard. Like that's like every story. Like there's so many stories that are like young person, doesn't know that they have like a magic.
Sounds like Huckleberry Finn to me.
Yeah. It could be anything. Enter in the Rye.
Doesn't he end up in a ghost house at the end of that or something? I don't know.
I don't even know what happens in Harry Potter. I think he gets on a train at some point, right? Like he goes to school. He plays a game that's not real, that involves a ball that you throw. I don't know. I kind of want to never know. Anyways. So there are two things in here that I found as like, when you're talking about references, they were very interesting to me. So we have some of our normal ones, Antony and the Johnsons. We have Uncle Tom's Cabin. We know that. But then there's like a reference to Indoor Bandy. Do you know what Indoor Bandy is?
No idea.
It is a game. It is like floorball played inside in the winter.
Floorball, more like indoor soccer, or would it be
no, like field hockey.
Field hockey.
Like field hockey, but indoor. And that's pretty cool. That's fine. But the one that was more stunning, which I'm embarrassed to have looked up, and I'm pretty sure I'm on a list now, is on page 104, where it says, the speech I'm writing is my revenge for everything that I didn't like about the previous year. In the news, there's a survey about which person has meant the most this year. The Pocket Man pedophile has a lead over the Pope. So no one should feel too inferior if one isn't very popular and doesn't make it into one of these lists. Okay.
Yes, I'm like, what is a Pocket Man pedophile?
Do you know? A Pocket Man pedophile is a man named Eric Anderson, who was a child molester. He was born in 1952. He was arrested in 2008 after being accused of molesting hundreds of children since 1976. He was released in 2014. Lord. Yeah. He's released in 2014. And they referred to him as the Pocket Man or the Bandage Man. And do you want to guess why the Pocket Man?
I'm guessing he had a hole cut in his pocket so he could
Nailed
stimulate
it.
himself in public.
No. He had a hole in his pocket so that he could ask people to help fish out his keys.
Oh my goodness! Why are you reading this to me, man? I was having a.
Because I looked it up.
Oh look, here's
here's
my daughter. Hi. Pocket Man. Yeah, Pocket Man.
Well, initially
Okay,
I thought it was
here.
like some sort of like retro advanced reference to like Kim Jong Un or whatever, and like a Trump fight. But oh man! So in this she get
right on cue, of course.
right on cue. Anyway, so there's a few other things in this part about her writing, which I think are fun. Like there's the bit about where the agent is recommending that Keppel and Dom go ahead with publishing a manuscript. They don't want to, but I don't care so much about all that. All I can think about is the fact that someone has actually read her book. And then on page 108, but is it worth the read? I asked Dad. It's better than a lot of other things that are published, said Dad. This isn't saying much, but it still makes me happy enough to set a new record with my soccer tricks. But
There was just before that too. Mom says that the neighbor will take offense. I wrote about a man who abandons his wife for an accountant. Mom also says that if I have any readers, they'll be deterred by my long sentences.
Encouraging parenting.
Yeah. Well, that's a little long. I don't know if I want to read it.
I
have a question about publishing, because this came up when Lena Wolf was coming through Rochester, and we got to hang out and talk with Lena a little bit. Which I forget who published. Was her book originally published in Norway?
Lena
Or Denmark? Yeah.
I think so, but
Because I know she lives in she has I believe she has a Spanish husband. I think they live in Spain, but her book was originally written
Swedish.
Norwegian.
Swedish.
Swedish. Okay, and it was a Swedish publisher that published it first.
I believe so.
Okay, but like I remember when I was asking her about kind of her publishing journey, because I always like to hear about how people broke in, and because everybody has their own kind of path into publication.
Mm-hmm.
She was like, yeah, I sent it to the publisher, and then a couple of weeks later, they got back to me and said, yeah, we'll publish it. I was like, really? That's how it works there? She's like, well, it's a lot smaller than how publishing is here. And it was the same thing with this, where like you just mail your manuscripts.
Yeah.
Like put papers in an envelope and mail, like, I'm going to mail this to HarperCollins. Dear HarperCollins, here's my book. Like, is that how it? Is that really how it works in some of the overseas publishing?
Yeah, I think it's a little different now compared to like 10 years ago. But but I think that's it. That's still just generally one of the ways. Like they just like everyone's in touch, everyone's like close together. So when she mails it in, they email back to her like,
yeah, hey,
we received it. Yeah,
that is amazing. That is incredible.
Yeah, they don't know
nicest. Wow.
But yeah, it does lead to other weird problems. So there's one section here. Hold on, I'm gonna
because you get that as well, don't you? You get people that just out of the blue mail you manuscripts.
Well, like that one guy who sent us the thing yesterday that wants us to proof his and tell him what's wrong with his Bengali book. You just like send us his book so he can get some constructive criticism. Yeah, we get some, and we get other things that are submitted through Submittable, and like people just mail stuff. No, it was just in Bengali.
Translated?
No.
So out of your office of 3, how many of you are?
He's looking for parts for people to criticize. Like he was asking for advice. So like that's a step forward. It's a recognition. Okay, so I have to tell, I'm going to do this, and I hope that Becky doesn't mind, but Becky Crook sent us a message with information about some of the games and translation things that she had in this that were tricky. And one of them came up in this section. It's on page 113, where at the bottom of 112, beginning of 113, she's at a party. And she's like, this is this guy. And then she says, throughout the entire party, I sit with a queasy feeling. I have this feeling that surfaces when I am pretty, that I should use my prettiness for something. The crocodile hunter is dead, by the way. I started to cry when I read it on the news ticker, and I pound my hand on the table. The others wonder why I'm pounding the table and crying. Okay, so Becky said there's some of the funny puzzles that she had to figure out which never really made it in the book. So at one point, the narrator, Kjersti, is sitting in a bar with her friends and or colleagues, and while they're conversing, a television news program in the background announces that a crocodile hunter has been killed. And Kjersti blurts out in English, sad, 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 and then writes, and then everyone wonders why I am suddenly talking about sperm. This is because the Norwegian word for sperm, sad, is pronounced like the English word sad. I couldn't quite figure out how to do this in translation without going into an explanation about how she's speaking Norwegian 1 minute, English the next. Felt like a longer explanation would take away from the momentum of the story. So I believe this got cut, although I can't remember now. It did get cut, Becky. It got cut, but it's right here. But that's an interesting little bit to know as a background, that was another set of another layer of joke in here that I don't know how you would do that in English either. I have no good solution.
It wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Because again, here's another thing I learned from watching that program about comedy. They said comedy is like when you see the train going by on train tracks, and there's that one empty box where there's no car, and you're trying to jump your motorcycle through the empty box on the train going by. So like if it goes past, like you don't get to jump the motorcycle. So like with that joke, trying to do the sperm joke and then explaining it, it's like, nope, you have missed your window. Like the comedy will not work there. Like absolutely will not work.
So there's a part in the dream part too where they're talking about remembering dreams, and dreams are like a big part of it. But he talks about jokes and says that there's like, I don't know if this is true or not, but the character says that the reason that we remember all bad jokes but don't remember good ones is that the best jokes are jokes that are unexpected and startle you. And the bad jokes are the ones that you already sort of know what's coming. So you can always remember those, but you can never remember the ones that actually surprise you. And I know that like my theory of like of comedy, like all comedy, that's the best comedy is a comedy that makes you uncomfortable. Like if you don't feel a little uncomfortable, it's not going to be funny. Like you have to be walked into that. Otherwise it's just like a pun. Or whatever. But yeah, so that it's funny, like the idea that you can't remember any good jokes. You can only remember the shittiest ones.
Well, speaking of Crocodile Hunter, I saw that the Miami Marlins got in trouble, I think it was last week, because they were tweeting at the Tampa Bay Rays, telling them like on Twitter, like, you need to get offline. You are literally the animal that killed the crocodile hunter. And they're like, that is so distasteful. I can't believe you. Like, your mascot killed Steve Irwin. Like, you need to go. You need to get out of here.
I really want to envision that like, so I've been trying to stay off Twitter, but like with all like the brands, like how every corporation, every brand has its own like voice. Like, is that Arby's is always like stoned, and like Wendy's is always like snarky. They all have like their corporate voice, as if like these monolithic brands have some sort of personal identity. But I want to imagine that there's like there's like a warehouse of like 22-year-old kids just out of college who are just sitting around like frantically coming up with new tweets for all these different brands, all in like a call center, but like a tweet center where like all the millennials are just housed trying to figure out what should Chick-fil-A be saying? Like, what is the Chick-fil-A voice? Like, what is the voice for Rakuten? Like, there has to be like, I wonder if they have style guides inside each one of these corporate things. So when they replace these people who are like the main tweeters, they have like some sense of like who the character is of this brand.
The style guide
it's
for
insane.
How can we make a horse shit tasty and cool?
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of, there was were you alive when the Dunkin', I think it was Dunkin' Donuts, would have the time to make the donuts guy?
Yes.
So the commercials, if anyone's too young for this, there was like a dude, he had a mustache, he was like middle-aged guy, and he would get up early and be like, it's time to make the donuts, and go make the donuts for, I believe, Dunkin' Donuts. So there was a time when I was in college where they retired him, and there was like a big campaign where they're like, the donut man is retiring, and so he's going to the donut man is going to like, go away. So for one day you get like free donuts from Dunkin' Donuts, and he's no longer going to be in commercials and blah, blah, blah. As it turns out, he was being retired because he had died, and they'd been using like reclipped images of him and just recycling that for a number of years, that he was not alive. It was just like repurposed old footage into new commercials. And I want to envision like some guy making those and just being like, I can't fucking deal with this anymore. We need to kill off this character, because I'm literally playing with Deadman images like for 8 hours a day, coming up with new ways to say time to make the donuts. Oh, horrible. Anyways, what else in here is good for this section? Oh, wait, one other 117. She talks about the sixes, the dice. She referenced the dice.
Oh, I missed that. Where is it?
It's on right in the top of 117. She says, I don't have a clue. The stuff I've written could be anything from 2 to 5 stars. In any case, I'm positive it's neither a 1 nor a 6. In many ways, a 6 would be just as scary as a 1.
Yes, that's so good.
I think the most important part of this is actually, of this particular chapter, is this has been the longest chapter that we've read so far. I don't even remember what it's not My Cabin, it's the one after that, right? It's The Cellar. Yeah, The Cellar is on page 126, where she goes to swim, feels like she's part of nature, and then gets rid of all of her stuff. She gets rid of the electric bed, the reclining chair, the wheelchair, the walkie-talkie. She goes swimming again. So like she's in a much better physical place than she was when we first started reading about her.
And even though it makes her sick, like she realizes, like, I don't know if I can be good to myself if I'm back with Eric. Like, I need you not in my life. And so she tries dating somebody else. I mean, I know she ends up vomiting, but
that happens. To be fair, like if you made out with some dude, any woman should probably feel free to vomit. Like most dudes are probably pretty gross. Like,
but I was so worried that she was going to end up getting back with Eric, and it was just going to derail all of her progress of writing the books, writing the next book. Because at this point, does she have? She has the short story collection, and then the heart book that she's talking about as well.
Well, the old folks home one, the Mateo one. Yeah, this description of her story sounds wild. A dubious man outside of Hotel Bristol tells me how titillating I am. Thanks a lot, I say, feeling pretty in my dress, especially when I go to my writing course and read my short story. It's about a man who wakes up every morning and wants to escape his rotten life. His existence is nothing more than an accumulation of monotony. And one day he lies down on the railroad tracks, the snow falling onto his face, but then the train doesn't come. He has to climb back up, nod awkwardly to people on the platform who are standing there staring at him. That's a great story. I would read that story.
Yeah.
I would totally read that story. Then she gets rejected. I don't believe that this is the novel which Skomsvold should make her debut. This is a sentence that will haunt Skomsvold for many years to come, which is great. And at the bottom of 127, I didn't win the novel competition. I put the letter, which states between the lines, I'm inept at writing, back into the envelope. What if I'm wrong? What if they're right? So there's your self-doubt thing again.
Yeah. What kind of advice is this too? I don't believe this is the novel with which Skomsvold should make her debut. Like, it's good, but you don't want this to be your first.
Yeah.
Right.
What we did, we've done that before too. Like even, and there's always, it comes up a lot because a lot of authors will want like their most recent thing published first. And sometimes you're like, that's fine. But like this other thing that was much more popular and that people really responded to, like, is probably a better way to start. Like, I know you're most hyped up this, but we did that with the Sarah Mesa books. The 2 novels, we're doing 4x4 and then Carta Pan, because Carta Pan involves like a relationship between an old man and a very young girl. And although it's not like sexual, it's semi-uncomfortable. And I felt like that would be a worse, even though the agent, everyone's like, got to start with a new book. I'm like, I don't think so. I think that might scare people off. Whereas if they read the other one and are like, okay, I see, this book about 4x4 is about like a boarding school as corrupt and sinister. But that's like a readable thing that I think people will respond to. And then you can be like, also, here's something that's a little bit more on the edge and not scare people off. So I think that I get that advice. I've given that advice, but in different words. Like, I think you should start with X instead of Y, not this is what you should make your debut, I suppose. But like, no, like, don't start with a short story collection. Just kidding.
No, definitely do not. No, start with a novel, and then if that does good, then you can do your vanity project or whatever, your cute little stories. Nobody gives a shit about.
So the thing that's fun about the switching this, so 129 ends with, maybe I just have to start over again. Maybe I'll succeed the second time around. Maybe the story about Kjersti is a circle. Then goes to the loft, which it took me a while, maybe because I just didn't remember things, but I was like trying to figure out what was going on here. But this goes back in time to when she's 20 years old and she's going off to college to study computer science. So it's pre everything that we've read, because we started with her in the old folks home, having had this like breakdown from chronic fatigue syndrome and dealing with it there. And here she doesn't have that. But there's a lot of interesting things about this. Like one is like her trying to like figure out how to go to school and like and fit in with people. And there's some great jokes like on 134 where they're like showing like what sort of things that she could join. And she's already been sick, but the way that she's been sick, they refer to it as mono. And I'm not entirely certain through here. There's no indication of whether or not they know like what she's like, that she has chronic fatigue syndrome or ME, or if it's like, you're just sick and we don't know why. But she's like, I never recovered from mono, then so-called chronically ill. But like, she's sort of embarrassed about it and hides it. And when they're talking about different groups that they could join, she's like, oh, there's lots of different groups. And maybe I'll join soccer, she says. And that's when my heart sinks to the floor. In my former yearbooks, I wrote soccer star under what do you dream of being when you grow up? A friend of mine wrote ant, which I think is perfect. Such a good joke. Such a good joke. But yeah, so she is in college here and like is like semi awkward, has had dealt with this thing. She doesn't go to like she doesn't want to go to like this party. There's a funny bit about her going to a party and winning a dancing contest with her one move, which is she can't dance, but she has a single move. I did all night. I held my hands in the air and twisted my wrists. I'm not good at dancing. Still, I was happy to have found one move that worked for me. After I was surprisingly named the competition winner, for which I received a medal and everything, which I can totally envision. But then she falls apart. Yeah. Then she falls apart and has to leave. And it's on like 141 that like everything turns bad. I can't sleep. I can't make my hunger subside. In the morning, there are more than 5 bowls on the counter, crusted remains of milk and muesli. The smallest touch feels like a fisted punch to me. And so she has to go away. And so like this is that beginning of that. So it is circling back. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen in the next section. Like if this first part that we've read so far was her like wanting to become a writer, she's written this thing. They say it's not the book that you want to debut with. You've gotten to this point, but like now she's going to start over again. Maybe the telling of her story is the cyclical thing. So she's gone back in time to like where she first comes in encounter with really breaking down from chronic fatigue syndrome or ME and going to go forward from there, I'm guessing. So I'm curious to see like how her structure works with this and like and creating her sense of self and getting to become a writer at this point. Because I was like, that one came out of nowhere to me of like, it took me longer than it should have. It was also like 7:05 this morning while I was sitting on the porch reading. So I was barely awake, but it took like 3 pages before I was like, wait a second, this is back in time. Like this doesn't make any sense. Like
where am I? Wait, what am I?
What year is it?
Who am I?
But it's pretty cool.
That's the cliffhanger, right?
Yeah.
What will she do back in time? Join us next week.
Because that's what ends with her creating like this code. It's funny because she also says she doesn't like computers, which just ties into like when it's like she's weird about getting the Mac, but in here she's like, I don't want to learn computers. I figure I'll study computer science because if I can like that, then I can like anything. What a dreadful
way to live life. Like recent studies, something like somewhere on the order of like 80-something% of people in the United States are either completely indifferent or hate their jobs. Like there's only like 10%. There's only like 10 or 15% of people that are actually happy in the work they do.
those
Most of them are just like, I guess I could just code.
I guess I could sit in this tweet warehouse creating new brand information. Great style, guys. She ends with like coding her own little operation when she's like, hello world, here, which will say like, hello world, here I come. And then she changes it to hello old folks home, here I come. So we know that we're back at that point. She's sort of looped around through that. Yeah. So, I mean, it's cool to see that section like right after this longer one about her sort of successes and like setbacks, then to go back in time and see this really starts to put in place what we saw in the first chapter. So it's cool. I'm really digging this book.
Yeah, and it's interesting too with like with the computer science background, right? Because you think about, like compiling the coding and the lists and the bundles and all the kind of stuff that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And then with her, it's about she has to make lists for herself and like order them, or even something like with the reading. Like I charged myself to read 50 pages today. I only did 40. Like right. Everything has to be like there's intention and kind of like I don't know, like a charge that she puts to herself, like things that a lot of folks like you and like maybe not so much for you and I, because we treat it like work, but like she's treating it like work, where I have to get my words in today, I have to get my reading in today, I have to get my life in today. The fact like she has to do that in order to feel human or regain her humanity, I find that very kind of interesting and compelling in that section.
Me too, and it also ties into like where she's always talking about how many steps she's going to take.
Yeah,
like I had to do 20 steps, or this was hard to do these steps, or it's like that physicality of that too. So, well, cool. I'll ask you about your favorite line in a second, but the next sections that we're going to do for next week is page 144 through 180, and this is all of the section, the zone, which is very, very, very short, and then the beginning of the human school as the next section. So. I'm really curious to see where this is going to go next. It's interesting because it is a book that's tricky to talk about in a way because it's plotless, the way that like Pessoa was plotless. But I feel like there's a movement here that I think we'll be able to see more as we get further along, to like how she's structuring the story of her life and of becoming a writer. And I think that's cool. And I feel like her writing is shifting as she advances, where it's becoming more self-aware and like a little bit sharper too. But yeah, so do you have a favorite line?
I did. I wrote it down. It was on page 111, but I have a library book, so I couldn't underline it. So if you want to read yours, I'll find it while
okay. The one that I marked is on page, it's a little bit long, but on page 136. She says, I search among the store shelves. It seems like they've moved the muesli. If I travel at speed v past a package of muesli, it is correct to believe that the muesli is stationary and that it is me who is in motion. But it is just as correct to think that it is the muesli that is traveling past v at a speed of negative v. The muesli and I are traveling together out of the store, and I think that of all the nonsense that exists, science is the worst because it is so damned logical and thought through.
There are several things I liked on 111. One, she calls, I heard Florence Nightingale was a bitch. Maybe that was the ME, but that was funny. No one has perfect skin, says the psychologist. And then she says that I have to write, quote, pretty enough on my mirror with red lipstick. I don't have red lipstick, but I tell her I can write it on a Post-it note instead.
I love that because in the next line is she tells you about a teenager whom she's treating for bulimia.
I just like that idea. Like, oh, just take lipstick. Like, I could do it on a Post-it note because I'm an author. Like,
I don't have red lipstick.
Screw you and your lipstick on the mirror. Like, I'll write it down.
Oh man. Well, anyways, thanks for listening this week. We'll be back next week with those next section. You can always find us online at open_letter or Chad W Post, your Brian Wood _ and tell everyone to go buy your book.
Yeah, go buy the book. If not, just to like let me know that it's not great. I would love to hear back all the negative feedback you possibly could have. Bring it on. It's at BOAEditions.org. It's available for pre-order. It comes out in October. So
perfect. Yeah. Good. Okay, well, we'll talk soon. We'll talk next week.